Listen, Jesus, I don't like what I see. All I ask is that you listen to me. And remember, I've been your right-hand man all along.
You have set them all on fire. They think they've found the new Messiah. And they'll hurt you when they find they're wrong.
Dun-dun, dun-dun, dun-dun. Nazareth, your famous son, should have stayed a great unknown. Like his father carving wood, he'd have made good.
Carving chairs and wood, whatever.
Oaken chess.
Oaken chess? I thought it was wooden
Would have
chess.
suited Jesus best, he'd have caused nobody harm.
No one alive! All right. I think we did that.
Why did we do it?
Why? It's totally unrelated to anything.
What is this? No, it's not, because it's a show about friendship. That's the kind of shit the listeners love, trust me. The show, at its heart, is about a rock-solid friendship that you can listen to and pretend is involved in your life in a real way. And it's a real, genuine friendship.
That's true. We've known each other for, what, 20 years?
At least
30 years, probably.
For the duration of the song, at least. Yes, that's true. For real, though.
Yeah.
Since we were 5, right? That's the canon in my head.
Yeah, so I thought this was a show about science. I did a bunch of research and stuff. So
all right, let's dispel the haze then. Hey everyone, welcome to Science or Whatever, a show where a guy with boundless confidence in a field that he only dimly understands interviews his oldest, bestest friend, who's an actual scientist. I'm Michael Swaim, and with me as always is my pal. Introduce yourself.
I'm Griffin Rowell.
All right,
Michael's
sir.
pal.
Excuse me, sir. What are your credentials?
Oh, do I have to? You're going to make me do that? I guess that makes sense.
I think it makes sense to go over, because, listen, these guys know me. These people know my deal. I'm a shameless self-promoter, and all I basically do is explicate my deal professionally.
Yeah.
But people don't know your deal, and you're such a core part of my life, but we haven't, worked on much public-facing.
No.
So what's your deal? Who are you, Griffin Rowell?
Ooh,
what's going on?
That's a complicated question. But as far as the science stuff goes, I studied physics in undergrad, so I have a cursory knowledge of general physics. And then I did a master's degree in aerospace engineering, and now I do that notionally, although I'm a systems engineer, so mainly it's spreadsheets these days. But I still do some reading here and there. So.
And during your period of undergrad study, was that when you were arrested for public exposure, or was that?
I wasn't arrested. I was detained. Okay. For public urination. Public urination. Not exposure. I am not on any list. What are you doing to me?
Everyone knows Small Beans as the Gotcha Network.
Yeah.
Ruin your life.
So, is this a bait and switch?
No, it's not. It's not. It's really Science or Whatever.
Okay.
Because we used to have a show called Pop Culture Petri Dish, which may one day return, I don't know, in glory or ignominiously. But I miss having a science show, and I wanted an excuse to talk about science. And the direction of this show is going to be simultaneously wilder and more constrained, because Griffin has done actual research and has brought real science to bear, and I'm here as a yokel to go, wow, that sounds amazing. But I'm not phoning it in. I'm someone who genuinely has a layman's love of science and physics, and quantum physics specifically. And what? We're not talking about any of that today, are we? Or is the sun quantum physical?
Well, that's I think that's the next one that we're doing, but.
Oh, you've decided the run order as well. Okay.
We're doing Newton first.
Well, please. Yeah. It's your show, Maestro. What are we talking about today?
Well, I figured during these trying times, we could discuss, one of the more incredible times spent in quarantine, hiding from invisible demons that we all are running from right now.
Oh, okay.
So the man is Isaac Newton. And I don't know, do you know who Isaac Newton is? Should I explain? Is there...
I think it's... Well, here's the things I know about Isaac Newton. The apple tree in the tree story, but it's apocryphal, right? It's more of a way to explain what gravity means than literally what happened, or did it happen?
We'll get to that, and maybe more that maybe more that Newton is like you than in an apocryphal story appearing out of nowhere, but shamelessly.
Shamelessly self-promoting.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I know about Newton is that he contributed so much to science that I can't understand his contributions. Like, he's one of the biggies. And then also he just was a weirdo who would just try anything, which makes sense as a scientist, right? But the story I remember very well was that in one of his journals from when he was super head of science chair at Cambridge. What's the position that
the Lucasian chair?
See, this is why you're here. This is great. Yeah, the Lucasian chair. That is it at Cambridge or Oxford?
It's at Cambridge, yeah.
Okay, and it's the same position later held by Stephen Hawking. But anyway, Isaac Newton held it once, and they were going through his old records of all his experiments, and he performed a private experiment where he stuck a spoon in his eye.
It was actually a sewing needle.
Oh, okay. So tell us about that. My version that it's in my head is the journal just says, like, inserting objects so-and-so centimeters, blinding pain, ceasing experiment.
Yeah. But it was actually more horrifying. It was a long, blunt sewing needle, and he just pushed on the back of his eye socket and looked at what colors showed up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he
just gathering
data. Try stuff. Yeah, that's amazing that he would gather. Is there still science of note that you could theoretically discover through your senses directly, or were we at the point where it all has to be discovered mathematically?
Well, I think that's probably that's really interesting, and we'll probably get into that with Einstein, because Einstein was also someone who's very conceptual, and was born 250 or 200 years later.
Right.
So I would say that if you actually denied that as a possibility, you'd be pretty arrogant, and you'd think that we know more about the universe than we do. Things are definitely way more complicated than they were during Newton's time, but these special minds come along every once in a while and just look at the world in a way that only comes along every couple hundred years sometimes. So, but that's not to say that the people during Newton's time were any slouches. This was the beginning of the scientific revolution, and gave us modern thought, basically. So it's a good time for science.
But was it true that Newton was a big, think different guy once in a generation, if that?
Oh, I mean, it's undeniable. Personally to me, I would say that Newton and Einstein are the greatest minds of all time, and mostly because what they were able to do was use intuition to suss out universal, I wouldn't say truths, because neither of them are, they haven't explained everything fully, but universal characteristics that are so far beyond the experience of humanity that it's kind of difficult to wrap your head around.
Which I think is, that's the joy of being a layman to science is I just want to know enough to wrap my head around the concept and go, wow. And then I don't need to know all the math and vector calculus of it all.
And so I would counter that and say that that's actually the joy of learning science in depth, is that you realize the explanations that we get without the math are actually they're pale imitations of what's actually happening. And I would definitely suggest that anyone who has the the interest to look deeper into the vector calculus and tensor calculus and all those things.
Yeah,
So,
branches
sorry.
of calculus I'm not aware of. I did not know the phrase tensor calculus till now.
That's what general relativity is worked out, and so that's actually another really interesting thing is Einstein had to learn that it's not that these things just popped out of his head. He spent about 10 years trying to go from special relativity to general relativity. So you get to see that these are, even though they're giants, they're still flesh and blood, and they're not magic. So anyways, that's my piece on that. I'm sure it'll come
Nice.
up every here and there.
Oh, we'll have to do an episode about general relativity because that's one of those ones that I know infuses everything about every moment of my life, including time itself, and yet I still don't fully understand what it means in like a tangible way that I can wrap my head around.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's a super good one.
Yeah. But let's talk Newton in quarantine.
Okay.
First of all, what was he quarantining from? The Catholic Church?
He was
going to kill Newton?
quarantining from the bubonic plague, basically. There was a big outbreak.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah, classic quarantine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was 1665. He had just graduated from his undergrad, basically, at Cambridge, and then he had to go back to Woolsthorpe, England, to his family farm, and thus began the Annus Mirabilis. My Latin's kind of rusty, I guess.
Year of chicken Marbella?
The wonderful year, yeah.
Oh, the marvelous year.
So two people had those. It was him and Einstein. 1905, Einstein had one too. And this does not, this by no means represents everything Newton did, and actually the things we'll talk about he didn't finish during this time. So again, try to dissociate yourself from the idea that this guy is a wizard, right? He still had to work these things out over sometimes almost 20 years in the case of gravity. So,
but nevertheless there was a year where he had the initial idea for like 10 projects that all came to fruition and were like earth-changing.
So there are three main things we'll cover. But do you mind if we just talk about Newton a little bit? Just get a little bit of a sense for this man, his background. Who was he?
If it's interesting.
All right.
It's contingent. I'm watching you.
Well, okay. You can stop me if it's
Sure.
So his dad died 3 months before he was born. He was premature. They thought he would die. He was a sickly little, baby. His mom, this is a weird way to describe your baby, said he could fit inside a quart mug, which I assume that's
what?
A quart mug. I assume it's like a stein, like a 32-ounce stein.
Yeah, some of those mugs have a cork top on a hinge to kill the head on your beer.
Oh.
So that must be a cork mug. Is
that what that's for?
I'm guessing, but that is what that cork topper's for, yeah.
Oh, thank you for
See, we share information here.
Yeah. So his mom remarried when he was 3, and she just moved out. She has left him with his grandma, started a new life.
Wow.
And apparently that was common in the day, but I wouldn't say that social norms necessarily mean healthy parenting strategies. So later in a book of sins that he kept a book of sins, by the way.
A book of his own sins?
Yeah, he was confessing to God in his book of sins. One of his sins was that he was threatening his father and mother to burn them and the house over them. So he didn't like his stepfather very much, I don't think.
His stepfather and mother.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, stepfather. Well, he never had a father, so... because he died.
Well, that's
before
why
he
I
was
would
born.
think he would threaten to burn his bio parents' house down, because fuck them. They abandoned me, but I guess... You really hate the people that you're in contact with the most.
Right. So he lived with his grandmother until he was 12, when his stepfather also died, and his mom came back like nothing had happened. 3 new kids, just just forget the whole thing ever happened.
Conservation of energy.
Yeah, sure. And so she pulled him out of school to start farming, but as you can imagine, Isaac Newton as a farmer, he wasn't so good at it, and he didn't care for it very much. So he went back to school because it was clear that was not going to work out. Then he enrolled in Cambridge, and even though they were landowners, I guess, so college, interestingly enough, wasn't expensive back in the olden times, but I guess living alone in a city without your family was expensive, and so the family didn't actually have that much money, and he got by in school bussing tables for the wealthier students and cleaning dorm rooms, basically.
It's a real good Isaac Hunting story.
Yeah. In between being Isaac Newton. He wasn't a good student because he did his homework barely enough to pass, and then he went off and read what interested him. So he wasn't lazy by any means. Don't use this as a reason to say that you're Isaac Newton when you're not doing well in school or anything, but he was just off reading the modern philosophers instead of studying Aristotle as much as the curriculum wanted him to.
It's like if when they assigned us Ishi Last of His Tribe in a separate piece, we were like, fuck this shit, and read real books.
Yeah, right.
It's like he was already ahead of the curve. Yeah.
But so even though he wasn't, a stellar student per se, he still got accepted into the, basically grad school program. But then the plague hit, and he had to go sit at a farm in the country for about 18 months. So that is where the magic starts. And so just to go over the three things that Newton came up with during this basically year and a half period, and really 1666 is the miracle year. So he was just putzing around for a little bit. Yeah. Oh, that's true.
So apple trees, number one, and then what are the other two?
Apple tree, alchemy, and coin making. Those are his big things that he did.
The 3 A's.
Yeah. But no, he invented calculus.
Yeah.
He discovered that light was a composite of different, I guess he didn't really think they were waves, but a composite of colors, which led to a whole bunch of optics discoveries.
Discovered it or was able to demonstrate it? Because
that's
actually,
different. No, you're right. That was that was an experiment that he conducted, and there's some argument over how much it actually proves, but regardless, for the time, it was pretty.
It was an annus mirabilis.
It was mirabilis.
Mirabilis. It's a mirabilis.
And
it's a mitzvah.
And then gravity popped up out of there. So
all right, that's a big one. Including gravity, conceptualizing gravity as all mass attracts all other mass.
Well, so we'll get to actually the scale that he was thinking, and that is kind of the thing. But let's just start with calculus. So
great. That'll get us a fuck ton of listeners. Yeah, let's start with calculus. Let me ask you this.
Maybe we can make it a little bit more sexy, the calculus, once you understand the power. That's
what I was going to ask. So maybe this is what you're going to explain, and I vaguely know part of the answer because I did take calculus, but it's rusty. But I understand a logarithm and a tangent as shapes on a graph. What is calculus? What do you mean by invent calculus? Why invent calculus? What does it describe in the real world? You know what I mean? Whereas addition describes taking objects and lumping them together. What does calculus describe?
So calculus at its base is the study of infinitesimal amounts. Continuous change, kind of the same way that geometry studies shapes. This is an entire aspect of reality that we live through every single day, but we don't really have much contact with. So unlike geometry, where you can kind of manipulate things and get a sense of it, calculus is it's just a little bit more subtle. And there are plenty of math concepts that are very subtle and outside of our reality. But what Newton was doing is trying. I think the reason calculus popped up was because of the gravity problem. And one of the most fundamental and powerful parts of calculus is that it can give you the relation between things, as well as describing continuous change. So like, let's say you have a car, right? The car has position, it has a speed, a velocity, and it has an acceleration. If I asked you to relate those things, how would you come up with the answer? And are they part of the same thing? Intuitively, they seem to be, but is there a good reason that they should be tied together?
Man, you're really putting me on the spot here. I didn't know this was going to be a test. Yes?
Yes. But no. But
oh, thank God. Thank Christ. No, but I mean, I guess the answer would be, if representing those things in a mathematical system benefits us in some way or adds to our store of knowledge, then yes. Does it?
Yeah. So basically what happens is you start with a position or a displacement, and you can kind of over time, with a car, let's say you had a giant ruler or something, and a car is going by and you have a stopwatch. You can map the position of the car over time, right?
Right.
And then from that, you can, you can make an equation, and you can kind of say that there's some velocity there. And then if the car is doing something weird where it's at different places at different times and it's not a constant speed, then you can kind of say like, oh, it's changing its speed, and that's some sort of acceleration. But with calculus...
And that's where you get... Okay, go ahead. With calculus, yeah.
With calculus... these are functions, right? So if you have a Cartesian coordinate system in 2 dimensions, you'd have, some time. Over time, you'd have some position, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you graph that, it's going to be that's called a continuous function. And then if you take the derivative of that, so in the differential calculus, the tangent line to the displacement is actually, that is the velocity. So you can actually show
and
that.
So it allows you, to the layman listening, I think what this means, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is why I'm here. Functionally, this calculus allows you to predict things with some degree of accuracy, right? That's what we're getting at?
Not just predict, but also make predictions about things that are related and find relations that you may not ordinarily see. So this is like that's the simplest, I would say, to me at least, the simplest practical application of
And in another way, it measures the rate of change as it changes, which is not as confusing as it sounds when you get it. A great example I heard about was a study showing that babies are more likely to parse time logarithmically than linearly.
Oh, really?
And that adults, it's a learned process that we get an internal clock that gives us a sense of, I'm at the doctor's office and they told me I'd be waiting an hour and it's been about a half an hour, so I'm halfway impatient. You know what I mean? Or I have an expectation that I'm halfway through. Babies have a logarithmic curve where you don't feel like it's halfway through until it's more than halfway through, but then you really quickly start to get really impatient, towards the end of the waiting period.
Well, I've been there, so.
Yeah, but it was an interesting insight into the way perception is not always linear. We force time to be linearly perceived because we reinforce that perception of it. Anyway, that's a tangent. Ha-ha. That's a pun that'll keep giving in the show. But continue. So he invented calculus. At
a similar time, another guy actually invented calculus. And his name
Leibniz,
is Gottfried Leibniz. Yep.
Boom. Got one.
And guess what, though? the calculus we use today, like, the notation when you're writing out the calculus equation, that's actually Leibniz. Newton had a terrible notation. Nobody understood it. So Leibniz actually won.
So it's like the Tesla-Edison thing, where secretly Tesla's was better.
No, because AC and DC are totally different phenomena, but... But maybe that's a story for another day.
That sounds like a different episode.
It does sound like a different episode. But Newton did come up with it first, and for the rest of his life, he pretty much said that Leibniz was a thief, and he stole. He didn't come up with it independently, because of course that would lessen the magic of his own mind, right?
Right.
But so calculus, you said, can do the rates of change, but it does a lot more than that, and it's useful from everything from doing stuff like position, and also quantum mechanics and studying light and chemistry and everything. It is basically, it's the cornerstone of anything more esoteric than like dropping a ball off a building right
in front of you. And is it so pervasive? So my perception as a layman is that the reason that's true is because despite anything that you perceive to the contrary, everything exists on a spectrum and everything is ephemeral. Therefore, everything involves measuring the rate of change and transiency. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, somewhat, because otherwise you're looking at frames, right? It's photography compared to a movie. I can take a data point somewhere, but how do if you really take a step back, how do you really explain how that's nature?
Particle of sand is, you have to explain the Donnie Darko intention sphere of it all. Which way is it intending to go at this moment? Where has it been? What is it like? Yeah. That's a cool way to think about calculus. Well, calculus gives you the intentionality of the data point, right?
Yeah, basically. I think that's a decent way to put it.
I know that you would say that nature doesn't have intentionality, but you know what I mean. I'm anthropomorphizing data points.
I'm sure you're popular at parties doing that, but...
All right, nerd.
Yeah, nerd.
I invited you into the dojo. Show some respect. What else did he invent? Come on.
Okay, I think that's good for calculus. But so he was really important to, I guess, pretty early optical physics. So you have Galileo, who actually did two. He kind of did two of these things. He did the first real explanation of things falling at the same time, kind of getting at early gravity, and then he did the telescope. But I think that was he uses just lenses, right? So we're actually going to get into that too. But Newton showed using, I guess he was super into prisms. Speaking of nerds, he was just sitting in a room playing with prisms all day long.
Contact juggling his prisms like David Bowie in Labyrinth.
Yeah. I hope so. I actually wouldn't put it past him. He sounds like kind of a weird occult guy. So, but so he had this thing called the experimentum crucis, which I know that we have some problems nowadays, but I'm pretty happy that society's not so pretentious that we have to use dead languages to name every single thing we do. Can we agree on that?
I guess, except when you look at the periodic table and the new ones are like uluburundildilium, and you're like, was that necessary? Although I understand chemists say, yeah, because each syllable means something. But I don't know. I still feel like science is incredibly esoteric, hence this podcast.
Yeah, but that's fair. But I'm happy that we don't have to speak Latin.
Is particularly pretentious, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically just there to make it so the common person can't understand what's happening. It's like... That's interesting to me that science, small tangent, I'm
behind the scenes working on a spec pilot that's about the world of alchemy. And alchemy is not just turning lead into gold. It's if you go back in the past enough, there was a time where the word alchemy applied to engineering, mineral sciences, medicine, folklore, and scamming people. Like, you didn't know what you were getting when someone said, yeah, I'm an alchemist. They could be a doctor or a flim-flam artist, or think that they know what they're doing, but it's flim-flam because it's not real science, you know?
Yeah.
It's such an interesting mix of, like, when we first realized you could know things, like, behind the surface, there's things you could know. And, I don't know. I always like to think of that when I'm imagining, especially Newton and Galileo or these early people.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive when things just seemed like magic.
Well, so I can't remember who it was. I think it was Keynes in the 40s or something. I was reading Newton and said that he wasn't the first scientist, he was the last magician or something like that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, Newton was a total alchemist and was actually trying to do magic, like make up the Philosopher's Stone so he could spin gold and live forever.
That's the one that makes you live forever, yeah.
Yeah, it's Harry Potter. I just finished reading Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter to my daughter.
Is she transphobic now?
Is she transphobic?
Did it seep through? Never mind. What? You don't keep up with Twitter drama, clearly. You have too much science to do.
I don't.
J.K. Rowling is getting in trouble for transphobia, that's all. Science?
Yeah, let's get back to science. Although I'm sure Newton was a problematic character in his own right, although I didn't come across anything specific.
In this particular research dive.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. The fact that when you shine a light through a prism, dark side of the moon's out and becomes a rainbow, what does that mean? Why is that cool? What does that mean? Why does it matter to science?
Well, so before Newton, there was sunlight, which is white. And then I'm sure, you have like stained glass and stuff like that. So you have different colors of light. But this experimentum crucis was, I think it was like a series of 3 prisms. So he let the sunlight come through the window. It split out into a rainbow, and then he had another prism placed so that the sunlight would go into that prism and then recombine into white light. So maybe it was just 2 prisms. I don't have the diagram on me. But what it showed is that light is a composite of all of the different colors of light, and then that leads you to wavelengths and the spectrum of light and investigating what is light, if it's not just this thing, if it's actually this collection of properties, and then that takes us down the the steps. And Newton actually... I'm
just imagining being like a peasant, like a goddamn peasant, and someone coming and saying, like, see that sunbeam? Watch me unwind it and show you what it's made of, and then reassemble it into a sunbeam. That is so... it would make my heart soar. That's like the Pixar movie of that time. Just looking at a prism and clapping.
He was either a witch or a god.
Or a god, yeah.
And he actually was I believe the first person to describe that color of objects was actually the interaction of the object with light rather than the object creating light at you. Before that you would just say, oh, the table is white, and that was as deep as it went. Newton said that maybe it was the object trapping some of the light and reflecting some of it back to you, because it's all white light, right? So how is there color?
How do we see color? Why is there color?
And of course, we wouldn't know what that is until the 1900s with quantum mechanics. So,
but is it the physical shape of objects that dictates what wavelength of light they like? Is it the diagram, the molecular diagram of how it's stacked up, so to speak, that dictates what wavelengths are reflected back?
I guess maybe in a way, but it's the It's the it's the electronic energy, right? So the electrons are in different shells, and they have different energies that are needed to raise them. And then as they
this is definitely
that's quantum mechanics. We can get into that's probably a whole episode by itself.
But things have inherent qualities where they absorb some wavelengths of light and reflect back others, and that's actually the color you're seeing. I know that much.
Well, and so but what reflecting actually is so it's kind of funny that in the end, the object is actually generating light, because the color that it's reflecting per se it's the wavelength of light generated by the electrons falling back into a lower energy state. So it is kind of creating the light itself by interaction with the sun.
So do objects inherently glow to some degree?
Oh my God, Michael, you're going crazy with it. Yeah, that's called black body radiation. That's another episode too.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
That's great. This show has legs.
Yeah, well,
sister.
I mean, there's a lot of science.
Yeah, so he split up light. He split up light, and that leads to a bunch of stuff, not all of which we can cover in this episode, but that's cool. What was this third thing?
But I mean, like, it kind of shows you that the stuff that he was doing, in just a couple minutes, you came up with a bunch of, good questions.
Like, this means this and this, and what does it say about that?
Yeah, and I mean, that's science. I mean, it's incredible that we can even do this, that our
hashtag that's science.
Yeah. But so he said light rays are differently refrangible too, which I have no idea what that means.
You can't, Latin's fine, but you can't just make shit up.
Yeah.
My God, this light is defragulated. All right, Newton.
Yeah. So I think what that actually means is that I believe Snell's law is what eventually describes this, but it means that the different colors of light bend differently, they refract differently in the prism, so they're differently refrangible. If you ever want to spend a couple minutes not understanding anything, just go try to read one of Newton's journals. It's ridiculous.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that also why a rainbow comes out stacked? You know what I mean? Because obviously you're right, like the red light comes out at a different point in space than the green light, or you wouldn't see them stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
So he figured out why they wiggle through the glass in the way that they do. Gotcha.
Yeah. So I mean, with this, like we talked about, the optics kind of became a science. Not just telescopes trying to see far objects, but really the study of light itself.
It's like how we make lasers. It's how we do a bunch of advanced surgery, all kinds of stuff, right?
Specifically for lasers, Newton used prisms as beam expanders, which kind of like change the we'll say the coherence of light and how columnated the light is and everything. And
I believe Vegeta used a beam expander in his fourth form, I think.
But beam expanders were actually used in like the 1950s, I think, to create tunable lasers. It's like 300 years later. They're just kind of obviously using a lot more technology, but using some of the experiments and principles that Newton was working on. So it's pretty incredible. And then, of course, Newton didn't have it all. He thought that light was made of corpuscles, which are little particles. But, later scientists would argue they're waves. And now we kind of have this understanding, although I still can't really wrap my mind around the wave-particle duality.
Griffin's calling bullshit on wave-particle duality. You heard it here. Horn sound.
I claimed being a Flatlander.
I see. You just can't grok it. Sure.
You don't want to explain what Flatlanders are?
Do people not know the book Flatland? They must.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, or at least the Futurama episode where they become 2D, And they explain how if you existed in the fourth dimension, meaning time, you'd look at an egg and you'd see the chicken that it will one day become because you see all of time. Well, so that would be like if someone who was three-dimensional could look at a two-dimensional universe, they would see everything. They'd see through everything. And if you lived in a two-dimensional universe, you would think it's incomprehensible that there could be a third dimension. Just like we live in a fourth-dimensional universe and it seems incomprehensible that there could be a fifth dimension. But I don't know whether there is or not, or what that would mean if there is one. I think it's just a good exploration of the limits of what you can know.
Right. That was actually that was way better than I would have done. Thank you for tying that back to Futurama,
For sure.
which is also always a
Well,
panacea.
what if there are qualities beyond mass and time that we don't even perceive that
Well, I mean, that's
matter?
string theory and all that.
Right. All right, another episode.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if I can
Keep
get into
banking
string
on.
theory. I have no idea. Also, it might not be real, so it's kind of debatable. Anyways,
Sure.
Let's go on to gravity, shall we?
It's like evolution. Yeah, go
Oh
on.
yeah. I mean, that one.
It's just a theory.
Yeah, just a theory. So, Newton, who probably didn't believe in evolution, said he saw an apple falling from a tree. It never, I think even in the story, the apple never actually hit him. So I don't know how it transformed into that. But the story goes that he saw the apple and, he suddenly understood universal gravitation, which of course, is probably bullshit. I guess he told that story a lot later in life. It never popped up until he was like an older guy who was already super famous.
So he could just be like me, where I will embellish stories from the past.
Yeah,
you know this about me.
Just
yeah,
for
he
everyone
might just
listening,
be one of those guys.
if Michael ever gives you a figure, divide it by 10. That's probably the truth.
Unless I was telling you how crazy small something was, then you have to multiply it by 10.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Unless he says specifically, that's the fact. Then you believe Michael. He's not a liar. He just tells tall tales. But gravity wasn't brand new with Newton. So Aristotle had a description of gravity, although like much of Aristotle's descriptions, it was total bullshit. He thought everything was, it would accelerate differently based on its mass, which at large scales, he's actually more right again. But then Galileo did the experiment with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, where he dropped two objects and showed that regardless of how much they weighed or how big they were, they still accelerated at the same speed, right? So
in my mind, for some reason, it's a feather and a bowling ball. What was it really?
Well,
do we know?
I don't know exactly what he did, but feather and bowling ball only works on the moon, right? Because there's air resistance. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah.
So it would have been just like probably a small bag of rocks and a big bag of rocks.
Yeah,
because they'd have similar resistance. Yeah.
Yeah. But
and then I know he also did a bunch of shit with slopes and ramps and figuring out how things accelerate around loop-to-loops and stuff like that and why.
Oh yeah. I believe Galilean relativity is a thing too. So that's a story for another day too. But but Newton wasn't the first one. Is really the moral of the story.
Gotcha.
That does not mean that what he did was not an insane leap, though. Astronomy was becoming a more, relatively more mature field than it had been when Aristotle said that the universe was made of like 55 objects and beyond the stars was like the spirit realm or, whatever nonsense he said. I'm not a big Aristotle fan, by the way.
Clearly.
Yeah.
You're really tearing into him.
He's not. Anywho, there are better Greek philosophers. And he made Alex the Great, apparently. So Alexander the Great.
He made him?
Well, he was the tutor.
He gave birth to him? Oh, I see.
No,
he was Alexander's tutor. I didn't know that. I thought Aristotle turned out to be fictional, or am I thinking? Is Socrates fictional? One of them is fictional.
Fictional. Yeah. Well,
or he might be an amalgam of multiple philosophers or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So what Newton did is he's the first person to describe universal gravity. And what that is so everyone before...
I know you wanted me to go, oh, wow. But I'm like, okay, go on.
Well, that's because we live in the 21st century and this is all commonplace to you. But during this time, people were just starting to understand that the sun didn't go around the earth, right? So all of this is pretty new. And all of the gravity experiments up until this point were more just people dropping shit off of buildings, right? And Newton said, hey, what if the same thing that makes the apple, the apocryphal apple fall, is also the thing that makes the moon go around the earth? And so that was his big, it might not seem like much, but that was his insane insight in 1666. And
as a lover of science fiction, this is how we end up with that stupid explanation of warp drives where you're like, the gravity is so intense. This is the beginning of everything. Our understanding that all mass warps the gravity around it is so ubiquitous now. And you can prove it with, the experiment where you put stuff in water and it's attracted to it.
Now
matter attracts matter.
So you went a little bit too far. That's Einstein that did the warping. So Newton wasn't able to describe why things would be attracted. But,
sure, but it's in the same
he did describe why masses attract, or how mass is attracted. And,
okay, so what did he get the thing that it's like your gravity is equal to your mass squared over your distance?
Yeah,
did he
did that, and then but it took a while, right? So again, he came up with this stuff during this year, but he didn't publish this until 1687 in the, I'm going to butcher this Latin nonsense again, but the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, the mathematical principles of natural philosophy. And that is basically where he put all of his gravity work. And it's said to be the single most important text in history.
More than the Bible.
Well...
Hot take.
Maybe not to some people, but scientific text. How about that?
Well, what else? More than the Constitution?
Well, scientific text. We'll say it. And yes, I would say it's way more consequential than the Constitution.
What about the original George Lucas draft of Star Wars Blue Harvest?
I'm a big fan of the Constitution. Let's not go back to the Star Wars.
The Starwell.
To the Star Wars.
Yeah. It's no miracle anus or whatever the other Latin phrase was, but it's a pretty good Latin phrase. Sure, yeah. Continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that's what he came up with when he was in quarantine. Yeah. So he had to sit around for 18 months, and he had been thinking about some of this stuff, which is also amazing. He was doing this as an undergrad in college, and this is like the year after.
Oh yeah, we didn't even get into that.
Yeah, he's like 23.
Okay, so this is like if your graduate paper in college had figured out that gravity is universal, had explained the components of light, and had said, hey, what about this branch of mathematics? We could do this now. And everyone went, wow, that's a whole new branch of mathematics.
Pretty much.
And you were like, yeah, did I pass?
Yeah, exactly.
That is mind-blowing. I mean, that's... Goodwill Hunting got nothing on Isaac Newton. Any teacher would be like trying to take credit for, I think it was me who got through to this kid because he kicks ass, this kid.
Yeah.
23. Jesus.
And then, Newton went on to become the master of the mint and was like this ferocious, counterfeiting, prosecuting maniac who
Wait. The U.S. Mint?
No. The Royal
the British
Mint. Right.
The Royal Mint. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I'm a dummy. But what I just meant to say with surprise is he became the leader of any mint? Like, why is he the head of a government mint is what I'm getting at.
So I guess during his lifetime, the British currency was about to fail because there was so much counterfeiting. Like the art of making coins was just people like pouring shit in molds, and then that's your coin. And if it was Like, they had no standard weight or anything. So it took Isaac Newton to actually organize nature enough in order to create standard currency. And I think there was one counterfeiting trial where they tried to say that the coins weren't actually standard because the scale was broken. And he became enraged and proved that their scale was broken. And then by
doing some experiment.
I think they just compared a few things, but
sure.
He knew that his coins were perfect, and no one was going to tell him otherwise. So he's a maniac, but a wonderful maniac.
Well, I don't know how you couldn't after that. Like, when you throw in the curveball that he was that young, and I just don't understand how you could not. Like, where does Steve Jobs get off thinking that he's like a legendary mind because he assembled a successful company that sells electronics? Man, this dude was 23 and he thought of universal gravitation and optics and calculus.
Yeah.
That guy deserves to be walking around just shitting on everyone Dr. House style. He deserves it. He earned it. He is the chosen one.
And apparently he kind of did.
He did act like
he
that.
He wasn't a super affable man. And I guess he was really insecure, possibly because of the abandonment issues and all that.
Sure.
So actually maybe a little similar to Steve Jobs, but
yeah,
but
he probably bathed just as infrequently.
Probably, maybe a little more, but
maybe
not much. So yeah, that's Newton in a very, very small nutshell. There's a lot more.
That's Newton. That's 1 year of Newton's life.
Yeah.
Well, year and a half. So get to it, chop, quarantine.
No, it's okay.
Quarantine.
It's okay. I don't think we should be trying to be Newton.
You didn't bring this up to make everyone feel bad?
No. I think.
Okay.
I think we should just appreciate that there are, every once in a while, there are people who just exist outside of normal circumstance, and that's okay.
That's right.
And you don't need to be
there.
There
are Neos. No, you don't have to be Neo. We only need one.
Yeah. And in fact, if everyone was walking around being Neo, it would just be a mess. It would be a mess.
Obnoxious.
The worst. Yeah.
If someone was like, wait, looking at that flower, I understand the spiral nature of the galaxy, and everyone's like, we all already know that.
No, but that's like Leonardo da Vinci, actually. That's another amazing one. Just his studies.
Everyone already knew the stuff he knew? Or
no,
he
just
always
like,
knew
he would
stuff
just like
already?
Look at water curling around itself in currents and stuff, and he would just study geometry and math with no formal education. Just a mind
and just figure out like colloidal motion or whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, we don't need to feel bad. And this whole show, just keep that in mind for this show, because it's always just going to be like, what? Why? Why can't I do that?
Sometimes the focus will be a scientist. Sometimes it will be a discipline, like we could do a show on string theory if you knew about it, or we could do a show on optics, or a show,
Yeah,
I think,
course.
Yeah, it'll switch back and forth. And something I'd love to do on this show is let people know what we're doing next time, if you think that's feasible to do.
Well,
I know it is this time.
How about next time I explain to you that the sun doesn't exist?
That's right. Next time, Griffin will prove why the sun does not exist. You're delusional for thinking that it's there.
Well, we'll go over how it does exist, but it shouldn't.
What? I feel like we already spoiled the premise of the episode.
Tune in next time
on Science or Whatever to find out whether the sun exists. I'd ask Griffin where people can find it, but you don't want people to find you, right? You have a real life.
Yeah. Let's
Do
keep
you want
it.
people to follow you?
No. I don't. There's no way to follow me. I have no presence anywhere.
There you go. The video where you played the Tom Cruise character from Valkyrie no longer exists. I think that's it. I think you're in the clear.
Oof. That was dangerously close to exposing the past.
I will not name the video. We're done. We're done here.
I think we both should. Yeah. Anywho.
We'll be back next episode with more Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!